We are ready to start the next panel, from newsrooms to comms, transitioning from journalism to public relations. I'm Yolanda McCutchen. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations at the DC Housing Finance Agency, and I did my own transition from NBC News after 2 years to communications with a stop in academia along the way. So my panel here, they've all made that transition too. So Justice, I want to start out with you. You, in your intro, you alluded to the driving force that caused your transition. Elaborate more on that for us.
Yeah, when I graduated, so I went to Mizzou, and when I graduated from school, I knew that I was just gonna have a life of being on TV. I wanted to be an anchor. I thought I wanted to live in New York, and about 6 or 7 years in, I was burnt out. I was working 2 to midnight every single night. I was working in Louisiana, covering crime. There's a lot of it. I think the hard part for me was I remember calling my mom and just saying, like, I'm not good at anything other than talking on TV. And so thank God for like mentors who were just like, if you can talk on TV, you can write, you can read, you can do all these things. And so I just decided that I wanted to do something different. And so I started out my PR career working at Chili's. I traveled the country writing about margaritas and fajitas, and it was great. I love a good fajita and a good margarita, but like hospitality wasn't my jam. I worked at a children's hospital for a year during COVID, and so I wrote about babies dying of COVID, and that also wasn't my jam. Big Brothers Big Sisters has always been a very integral part of my life, and so when the position opened up, I was working straight just PR, so just doing standard PR for the organization. And they had a position open up on the influencer relations team. So now I work with all of our celebrity and influencer ambassadors.
So Lauren, what was the driving force for, and yours is somewhat of a transition, but not a full transition.
I couldn't let one go.
Okay.
So I had to do both. And there's journalists in this room, right? So I love writing. I've been writing ever since I was 5, but journalism wasn't paying everything I wanted it to pay. In terms of my life. I just had to be frank about it at a certain time in my career and in my life. So I had to figure out, do I want to do this or do I want to do that? So in terms of starting my career, I started off writing for the Afro newspaper while I was here. And then I moved to Atlanta to do some things with CDC, health communications work, and got my master's and stuff like that, and moved more into communications. But the bug to write and to tell stories, as we're talking about, never left me. So it was one of those things where, you know that scene in Next Friday when he's like, I gotta figure out how to get this money by tomorrow. I was like, I gotta figure out how to do both of it right now. And that's what I literally sat and figured out how to do, right? So I was still working in, communications, and I sent a note to, and this is when DMs, like people read their DMs, I had scripts, like I said, from the Afro newspaper, I had things in Washington Post and whatever. But I sent it over to one of the editors at TV1, and I said, I can write. I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. And I wanted to cover fashion, so as you can tell. So my first assignment, I said, I can cover Fashion Week for you. Like, you don't have anybody who does this. And so she said, okay, she gave me a chance. Basically, a black woman who I'd never met gave me a chance, and I've been writing, like I said, 8 years ever since, and that's expanded to more things because now I literally post and edit and set pitches and all those things. But I couldn't leave it, to answer your question. So I was just able to kind of do both because I needed to be edified financially, but then I also needed to be edified with my expression and those things.
How do you redesign your portfolios or rewrite your resumes so that it is attractive to PR jobs that you might be applying for?
Yeah, so when I started applying for PR jobs, I knew I wasn't going to be on camera anymore, but I knew that I had to write my scripts every single day. I had to write my web stories. I had to speak to the community. I had to, research things like that. So it was very easy for me to tell prospective PR jobs that everything that you need me to do, I do on a daily basis. The end result just ends up on TV every day. The other thing was when rewriting my resume, I found it very easy to just take whatever they put in the job description and put it on my resume.
Every day, like as a communications person, you're doing trend spotting. You are working in a high-paced, fast-paced environment. You're writing under deadlines. You're writing under pressure, etc. So literally, it's just a matter of writing down what they said that they need for this communication strategist and putting it, outlining those skill sets because you literally do it every day. I also think now, now we're in 2020, broader than that, 2026, whatever. We started like we were faxing things. We had Rolodexes. We were texting. We did things like that. Now communications and PR are we have content creators, right? So if you are literally a senior producer, and because I have a friend who was a senior producer at a show that got canceled, I helped her become a content creator on one of our teams. Because literally it's the same thing. You are putting the stories together, the segments together, the images is literally the same thing. With our social media strategists and some of our creatives and some of our folks who just write narratives for companies and help a senior executive or elected official say something. Yeah. It's literally transferable to what you do every day.
And I always still say, I'm a journalist. I work in public relations, but I'm a journalist even if it's not a period where I'm freelancing. And there are periods where I'll freelance because I'm interested in other people and other stories other than in my workplace. And it's one of those things where that question comes up a lot, but all of those journalistic instincts, they stay with you and within you and are definitely applicable in your public relations career.
One thing that you're hearing, and you'll hear this recurring, once a journalist, always a journalist. So that's in our DNA.
So you've all talked about transferable skills. Have you, and any one of you can take this question, have any of you, what are the learning curves you've encountered?
Run fast. I was like, you're gonna give me a week to write this? Like a week? And I just remember my boss just kind of being like, take it slow and steady. And I was like, girl, what is slow and what is steady? Help you. And so I think that I had to really learn. Pace was the biggest learning curve for me. And even now, I mean, years later, I'm kind of just like, okay, so don't think we should try our hand at something else because we're just kind of idle. So I think pace was a really big learning curve for me, but I think what helped me there was to know that I had the ability to, I didn't have to overwork myself and still was able to tell my boss what I was capable of doing and do a little bit more without, working to the midnight and covering homicides all day. So pace for me.
I'll jump in again. I will have to say, girl, we need faster pace. Come over to the agency. We have hourly deadlines.
I am just deadline. I am not an agency girlie, but I love that for you.
Pretty fast. I would say that one thing is that two things that always surprise me when I talk to clients, knowing media stuff on the other side. One is how much they think their story is news. Like how much they think is news. Like how much they are drinking their own Kool-Aid for real. And they're like, no. Like they'll tell you, no, but it does this and it does this and it does that. And you're like, that's sweet. Right. Like it's selfish. Or 20 people have already done it.
Yeah.
So it's just so interesting when you're talking to clients and you see how much communications professionals have to deal with, whether it's a nonprofit or a major company or elected official or et cetera, how much you have to tell them about the mechanics of a story, right? And how people care, how you touch audiences and what this audience cared about versus this one. And the intersections of them. I think is such, a surprising thing because you just didn't realize that people can be that closed-minded when it comes to, not even closed-minded, I think that's the wrong word. But that often turns about a touch in terms of what they're working on. So I definitely think, that is one thing. And then related to that is just how strategic communications is. Because depending on when you learned about communications and PR, most people think about, the people who pitch or the people who are calling the media, or they think about Olivia Pope, or like you said, the person, those types of imagery. But there are strategic communicators out there that literally write down goals and objectives and tactics. And you want this, these are the 20 steps in the ways that we're going to get there. These are the ways that you build down your audiences and you break down your demographics and your targets and things like that. So to really see how big that one pitch or that story fits into some things, I think can also be, a little bit different when you think about that strategic communications piece as well.
I've done the transition from journalism to communications. And one of the things, I've seen a lot of journalists go into communications and they're not in the right mindset. They are still thinking like a journalist. And I did that at the beginning, but I had a really good boss who got me out of that. But I see a lot of journalists who flame out from PR and communications. So what advice would you give them as they make that transition so they can be successful?
Find a mentor. I think that if I could find a mentor. You don't know what you don't know, and you can be the smartest journalist in the room. You are not the smartest PR professional. find a mentor, find somebody that's done it before you, find somebody that's made the transition, find somebody who, not even that was like once a journalist, find somebody who's always been a PR professional and learn from them. Find a mentor, it will change the trajectory of your life because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I can recall a time when it seemed that PR agencies in their hiring process viewed being a former journalist as a liability. And that I've had PR practitioners to say, look, we don't need that expertise, we don't really value it. It contaminates you or something, you know, that issue. But I just kind of filtered that, and I just said, well, I find that it's your clients at the end of the day are reporters for your clients. And if you've never had that experience, you don't quite have empathy or understanding of what they're up against.
How do you maintain your relationships with former colleagues or build new relationships? Say if you covered, like Roy had particular beats that he was covering, but then you may go into a completely different industry. Then how do you rebuild those relationships with journalists?
I think a lot of times when you leave the newsroom, reporters just think like, oh, well, like, I mean, there's nothing else that, you know, we can do to work together. Some of my best stories is me texting somebody saying like, hey, do you still work at so-and-so? And, you know, how can, you know, I have a story for you. Or if you don't work there anymore, do you know somebody that works at X, Y, and Z? And I think a lot of the times too, like, you know, it's kind of just like cold pitching, like, hey, Lauren, you don't know me, I don't know you, but this is what I do. If ever you have, you know, if ever I have a story idea, I would love to like send it your way. And that's for Lauren to say like, yes, I would love to hear about X, Y, and Z, or no, but I have a colleague that covers, you know, this beat. And so I think it's those relationship building skills that you had in news when you went and knocked on doors because you had to. I think it's no different than sending those emails or, you know, at networking events, going up and saying hello. I remember starting my current role, and my CEO was just like, why are you still going to NABJ every year? And I said, do you want to know how many people I meet at NABJ every single year, and how many stories we get from this? So last year, I remember after leaving NABJ, I pulled like a report. And I was like, these are all reporters that I've met at NABJ over the last 3 years, and these are stories they've covered from all 230 of our Big Brothers Big Sisters agencies, be it, you know, national or local. And he was just like, oh, I get it. And so I think for me, it was just easy for me just to continue those relationships that we already had.
Yes, I agree with everything you're saying in terms of maintaining those relationships. And I would say, just like with any relationship building, be a resource as opposed to someone who's just feeding information.